When I first got involved in acting, the movies that I saw were like all Marty's and Bob's movies, and Pacino and you know, Gene Hackman. It was all the '70s movies. So it was to work with these people in this kind of story in a movie about the guy that I was going to play. But it wasn't. I was more excited about the acting part. I didn't look at it as a break. I didn't look at it, you know, at that time you have no idea how the movie's going to come out. You just know you're working with legends in the making. I mean, you know, already Bob and Marty had such a massive work that it was great just to be playing make-believe with people who were so passionate about that, because I loved the stories that they were telling. You know, I remember the first day of rehearsal. You know, I had met Marty a couple times, and we went out to dinner. So, and he's just a great guy. Knows everything on everything. I remember the first time meeting, and Joe was really easy, but Bob kind of like was a little intimidating at first, and then you just get over it through rehearsal, the rehearsal period. What you start doing is you see actors working on a script. You don't see like legends walking in. You know, they have some ideas and some work, and some you say, that's an interesting way of looking at it. You know, you see human beings who are actors who happen to be legends and work really hard. So you saw the process. Bob was coming in from, I think he was doing a thing he did with Sean Penn. So on weekends he was coming in to rehearse. So here was a dedicated guy. His book was filled with notes, and you break it down and see actors as actors, no matter what level they're at. You just see them as human beings.
Paul Sorvino.
You're really dealing with very creative actors. It is not a run-of-the-mill group. I knew Joe for years. I knew Pesci for years. I had met De Niro, but he's not very forthcoming verbally. But we had met a couple of times, you know, with others.
Joe Pesci.
It's almost like he's a father figure. And Bob and I can get that close because we're very close friends. He's always been like an older brother to me, even though we're both the same. For some reason, I don't know why, ever since I met him, he's assumed that position. And so it was easy for me in Raging Bull because he assumed it right away, and he's kept it. He's kept that upper hand, that older brother thing. And so even through the 10 years, 11 years, it's always been there. And with him giving advice all the time. So when we did this movie together, I think it was easy for him to jump in that position of my father figure or my older brother that would take care of me in a way. And it's easy for him to get so upset when I get killed in the movie also. You know?
Working with Bobby was great. I'd always wanted to work with him. And after the first day we worked together in the scene where we go to get Henry Hill to come back, I remember, and it was very touching to me, as we're walking off the set, you know, Bobby doesn't talk a lot. He just stands there and he's a great actor, that's all. So we're walking off the set, and surprisingly, he just turns to me, throws his arms around me, and he says, "Paulie, you're great," and which was really a wonderful thing to happen. Yeah, that was a very, just personally, I'm not talking about my acting. I just think he just meant it was great to work with me, and it was a wonderful thing from a man who I esteem greatly as an artist, as a fellow artist.
They always wanted to talk to Henry about this or that. They'd come in with their subpoenas and warrants and make me sign. But mostly they were just looking for a handout, a few bucks to keep things quiet, no matter what they found.
Lorraine Bracco.
You know, one of the great things about Marty in this movie, Marty always played Karen Hill in a scene. When we would rehearse, when he would show the camera, when he would say anything, he would always play me. And for some reason, one day, I just said, why do you always be me? You know, why do you always Karen Hill? Why don't you play Henry? And the truth of the matter is he could have played them all. But for some reason, I always caught him playing me. And it always, always, always amused me. And also, Marty gave me a fabulous direction for Karen. He said, she's the movie star. So when I picked out my clothes, I you know, and my hair and my makeup and jewelry, you know, I always kept Elizabeth Taylor in there somewhere. And I also used a lot of music to put me in those frames of mind. I used a lot of Bette Midler in The Rose. You know, she sings about, you know, when a man loves a woman, and she has a lot of songs in The Rose that are very, very much for a woman who's desperate and lost. And unable to cope. And so I used a lot of her music during Goodfellas to bring me down and have that kind of raw intensity.
See you later. Uh-oh, all right.
I always dreamed the boy I loved would come along. And he'd be tall and handsome, rich and strong.
Actor Frank Vincent.
Billy Bat's scene is a real pivotal scene in the movie. I mean, he already knew in his mind what he was going to do with Joe and I there. See, I didn't know that. So he knew what he had in mind, because he knew the way he was going to develop the conflict between Joe and I, which is what he did in Raging Bull, and which is what he did in Casino. You follow me? So he already knew that. He had that in his pocket. See, that's the reason why Marty directs so well, because he picks his cast with a lot of thought and a lot. I mean, casting is most of the argument. You know, you pick the right people, you just leave them alone, and they will bring you the material. When you go in the morning, you just check it out, and you just block what you have to block, and it develops itself. And then he just oversees everything. And Marty's direction, in a general overview sense, is very subtle. He takes your side and he just says that was terrific, and maybe try to do this, be a little more threatening, or be a little less threatening, or when you walk in, don't look so confident, try to look a little less confident, or whatever the situation is. He'll just give you a couple of words, and he'll be right exactly what you'll know exactly what he wants, and he has the ability to do that without any fanfare or any pressure. If it necessitates it, he'll take you on the side. He'll say, "Excuse me, Frank, come in, see a minute." And he'll pull up his pants, and he'll go and say, "You know, when you walk in, and okay," and he just disappears. When you work for Marty, it's pretty easy. He's something. It's very loose, and it's a lot of fun. We laugh a lot.
Relax, will you, for crying out? What's getting to you? I'm breaking your balls a little bit, that's all. I'm only kidding with you.
Sometimes you don't sound like you're kidding. You know, there's a lot of people around.
I mean, I'm only kidding with you. We're having a party. I mean, I just came home. I haven't seen you in a long time, and I'm breaking your balls, and you're right away you're getting fucking fresh. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you.
I'm sorry, too. It's okay. No problem.
Okay, salute.
I had back surgery prior to that, and I went to the rehearsal in a van, laying flat on my back. We shot that in, I guess, June or July. And I had surgery in April. That whole scene at the bar, I was sitting on a little stool when I was in between takes, and all that stuff on the floor, that's Peter Bracco. You know what Peter Bracco is? Peter Bracco is a stunt coordinator for Sopranos. He did all that stuff on the floor. I was on the floor. I was on the floor for one shot, and I was in the trunk for one shot.
All right. No, I mean, the kids over here, we're hugging and kissing over here, and 2 minutes later, he's acting like a fucking jerk.
No. You insulted him a little bit. You got a little out of order yourself.
No, I didn't insult him. I didn't insult
Insulted him a little bit.
I played the drums. I was a recording drummer in the 60s. I recorded with all the rock and roll groups. I put on a lot of hit records. I had my own band. It was called Frank Vincent and the Aristocats. And then it became the Frank Vincent Show. And then I hired Joe Pesci in 1969. It became Vincent and Pesci. And we did comedy for like 6 years together. So when Marty hired us, he hired Joe. We did a film called Death Collector, Joe and I, because a friend of ours was writing the script, and he used to come and see us play. And it was a mob movie, and he would ask us stories about different mob guys, because every night in the club you had this faction over here, all different guys that were all connected guys. So he asked us to be in the film, and we were just musicians, and we played, and I studied some comedy, and Joe did a lot of comedy when he was younger. He did some television stuff, and we went and did this film. We didn't act together in it. We acted two different characters, and Marty saw the film and hired Joe to do Raging Bull, to play Joey LaMotta. And then I went in and read for Marty with Joe and Bob, and he tested me and he put me in Raging Bull. So then that started Joe and I together in the whole three films, because Marty said one time, he said, Vincent and Pesci are better than Abbott and Costello, he said. Because we had that thing together, that we were together for so long.
I don't want to get blood on your floor.
trunk.
Thelma Schoonmaker.
Marty's parents don't come to the editing room much, but they always are on the set, and they used to work on the set. They used to press the collars of the shirts that the people, particularly in the mafia films, wear, because only they, Marty said, knew how to do them properly. But it was great how much they were involved in his filmmaking. They would come, they wouldn't be there all day, but they were there almost every day, and it was a wonderful thing to see. And his mother learned a great deal, of course, about filmmaking from having been in some of Marty's early movies like Mean Streets. And I think he told the story about he was shooting the scene in which Amy Robinson has an epileptic fit, and Bob and Harvey are yelling at each other and having a big fight, and his mother comes out to stop it, and everybody in the tenement was fed up with them, and it was late at night. They were all people who had to get up at 7 in the morning and go to work, and they were screaming, "Stop shooting, go home, we're sick and tired of you." And Marty's mother came over and said, "Look, you got the master shot, why don't we go home?" And he said, "Go over there and stand in the corner." It was the first time she ever saw him as a director instead of as her son.
Anyway, no, it reminds me, I need this knife. I'm gonna take this, it's okay?
Okay, yeah.
I just need to pull
Bring
it
it
up.
back, though, you know.
Nicholas Pileggi.
He and I had very similar backgrounds. I mean, we're obviously Italian-American and grew up in New York City, and with all that implies. And we grew up in the same kinds of neighborhoods. He in Lower East Side, and I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, which was the Brooklyn version of the same neighborhood. So you know the culture, you know that world, you know who those guys are. Your whole life, you know who they are, and you know to stay away, and you know people who don't. And it's opera. It's being played out every day on the street. And Marty would look out the window, and he saw it all happening out there. And so did I. And family, we understood that whole role of family. I mean, I got to know and love his mother and father. And they were like my own. I mean, you know, because they're interchangeable. These older Italian-American mothers and fathers are I could have taken Charlie and Kate. Marty could have taken my mother and father. I mean, they're so similar. You go into the house, and they ask exactly the same questions. You know, what about your tooth? Your tooth. Did you chip your tooth? You know, and that sort of stuff. And so I think that bonded us very closely, very early.
It means he's content to be a jerk. And he doesn't care who knows it. He's content.
Did Tom ever tell you about my painting?
No.
I think the Mario Puzo novel, The Godfather, tells the grand story of that power elite that was the mob and its influence on the American culture. And I think there's no book that depicts it as brilliantly, and no movie that depicts it as brilliantly as those two movies.
Actor Frank Vincent.
But you got to realize The Godfather is a work of fiction. I mean, that's all made up stuff, you know. And I mean, not to say it wasn't great. It was absolutely brilliant. The book was, and the film, the characters and the acting, and it was just monumental film. Broke through the whole genre. It really put the genre out there.
But if Goodfellas or Wise Guy has any validity at all in that world, it's a nonfiction book. None of it is made up. It is all real. And I think it gets you as close to the real world of living the gangster life as just about anything.
It really happened. And people can remember Lufthansa. And they can remember the suite where all these things took place. They actually took place. So, I mean, mob guys all use this to be mob guys. Because that's what a mob guy is. You know, he's Bob De Niro. He's Joe Pesci and he's Frank Vincent, I guess.
Saturday night was for wives, but Friday night at the Copa was always for the girlfriends.
And last week we saw Sammy Davis Jr. You gotta see this show. What a performer. He does these impersonations. I swear, you would think it was the real people.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, you can see how a white girl can fall for him.
What?
Nicholas Pileggi.
In the Italian-American community of, say, 1910 through Prohibition especially, and into the 50s, that world was probably as strong an influence in the Italian-American community as there was. I know nobody wants to hear that, and I know all these really successful Italian-Americans who had nothing to do with those people, all those judges and people.